Hey everybody, and welcome back. Today I am obviously working on a new A-wing, and some of you may have seen my previous A-wing video. This one is going to be a little bit different. Today I'm working on painting in the style of Green Squadron. And the last one I did was obviously, well, not obviously. If you haven't seen it, it's obviously not obvious. But the last one was doing the blue colors as originally painted by Ralph McQuarrie. But today, Green Squadron. So I'm just going to get right to it. And the first thing I need to do, let's backtrack a little bit and talk about where we are at the moment. I have done some paint stripping on this, but as you can see, not all of the original paint is gone, and that's okay. I mean, the truth be told, it's probably not 100% necessary to strip the paint in order to do one of these repaints. I do it anyway because well, I like having as fresh a surface as possible to work from. But I think they've changed the paint on these somewhat because it took quite a bit of effort just to get it to where it is here. So I don't know what's different. It could also be because I'm also using the brush cleaner that I show in my A-wing paint stripping video and talked about in not so pleasant terms in my Millennium Falcon painting video. But in any case, it is what I used here. It didn't seem to work quite as well this time, but it worked, and I got most of the paint off, and I went back with a toothpick into some of the crevices like I did before, and with an old airbrush needle into some of the even tinier crevices. But in any case, how you begin your project is up to you. So, at this point, I'm going to be primering it. Well, actually, this is going to be its first base coat, but I'm using primer. I'm using Vallejo Surface Primer because it's a really nice light gray. Because this is plastic, it doesn't really require a primer, but I'm using one anyway. Oh, this is still a little wet. Let's see. There we go. All right. So it's going to be enough here to get a nice even coat and cover up any remaining color that might be on there. I'm not so worried about grays and blacks. Just the red. And honestly, I probably shouldn't be so worried about that either because that's going to get a coat of green later. So this is, you don't want this to be very heavy. You want this to be pretty light. The detail on these are very fine. Not sure why that's spraying so. All right. Okay. All right, so with the base coat on, the base gray anyway, the next thing we're going to do is the green of the Green Squadron. And I've already done a test with a little Joe Sonia Pine Green. And I've mentioned Joe Sonia paints before. I like them quite a bit, even though they take a little bit of extra work to deal with because these are tube acrylics. These are not hobby paints. They do require a lot of thinning to get them to work, and in this case I'm going to be thinning them quite a bit because I don't want them to be thick and fill up all my details and blah blah blah, and well, yeah. So in this case, I have chosen to build up the color slowly using very thin coats of the paint, and as you get more and more coats on, the paint gets darker and darker, and as you can see on my thumb there, it can get pretty dark. But the nice thing about doing it this way is that you can kind of get a nice weathering effect right from the get-go. If you were to lay it down with an airbrush, for example, you'd get a nice, clean, even coat of color. But by doing it this way, the panels have different shades of green and some streaks, and it really looks a lot more worn. And we're going to bring that out even more as time goes by. But for now, I'm going to go ahead and get to work on this. Now I'm going to get a little bit of water. This is just the paint and Liquitex airbrush medium in here. In here, when I say in here, I should actually probably have that on camera so that you can see it. And then I'm thinning this with a bit of water as well. And the idea here is going to be to build this up slowly. So you can see it's quite thin here. This is really tough to do. I complain about this all the time, trying to paint on camera. My head wants to be where the camera lens is, and normally I would have this up kind of almost in my lap. And honestly, as I do this, I'm not entirely sure where I want to stop. Okay, so yeah, I realized that I didn't quite know where I was going to go with this when I got started. Probably not a bad idea, or not a good idea, actually. So my plan now is to taper this back to the cowling and back. And then do the cowling as well. And at some point, I'm going to need to get this off camera so I can do the careful work to make sure that I'm not just slopping paint all over the place and making it harder for myself down the road. But there is coat 1, which we're going to speed dry with hair dryer. So you can see what I'm really doing here is just glazing these colors on. I'm not doing full paint coats. And again, the two reasons for that are one, so that we can get a good coat of color without swamping the details with paint. And the other reason is because it looks cool. And when we're done, it'll look something like that. And I'm going to go finish this, and I'll be right back. All right, so I went ahead and did not just the upper hull, but I also did the engine area on either side. And then I went back in and decided that I was going to use just a quick coat of Bealtan green shade from Citadel. And that helped to drop into some of the recesses and really get into those panel lines and really even out some of the unevenness of the paint, which, although I like in general, I didn't like as pronounced as it was, and so that really helped clean that up. I then went in and cleaned up the edges with my original gray color and dropped some onto some of these little detail pieces to bring those out. And I think at this point, my plan is to do some weathering. I don't know why I was talking like that, but there you go. So I'm going to need some Agrax Earthshade. I'm going to need some Nuln Oil, which is somewhere. And I'm going to get some of the clear, the medium, that stuff that you use to thin this stuff out. And I'll be back momentarily. Okay, we're back. And I am going to use, I'm going to start with a little Lamian medium here. Let me find a better brush for this. A little bit bigger. Okay. And I'm starting with a Lamian medium because I don't want to put a dirty brush into my clear medium. But I don't mind putting medium into my Nuln Oil. Alright. So I'm not going full strength on this. I'm going about 50-50. And because I know from past works that it's best to not work at full strength. Simple as that. All right, let me see, make sure people can see what I'm doing. Make sure I can see what I'm doing. And of course, I'm just washing this in. You don't have to be terribly careful with this, especially since we're not doing it full strength. And this is going to give the gray, it's going to darken it. It's going to sit in the recesses and bring those out some. But we can go back later and make them a little more pronounced if that's what we want. And I'm going to go around to the other side and continue on around. And you want it to get into that little recess there too. And we can do the gun. Something I didn't do when I was thinking about doing it was picking out some plates, the panels, to be different colors, and I may still go back and do that. All right, and that goes in there. Come back around to the upside. Same thing. Nice and even. Yeah, so this is one of those situations where you don't want to you don't want too much of this stuff sitting on there. You really want it. It's good that it's going onto the panels themselves and dirtying those up. The primary reason for doing this, other than that, is to get it into the panel lines. But if you have it build up too much, like this right here is a bit too much, it's going to leave a weird sort of, I don't even know how to describe it. It's not going to look realistic. It's going to look odd. And so I'm taking some of this off. All right, but the upside looks good. All right, so that needs to dry a bit. But I guess I could go onto this area here, there, same idea. I'm even going to go on the engine cowlings, because that's okay if those get a little darker. I'm all right with that. Flip around, trying not to touch anything wet. All right, same thing there. Drop it in that. Getting it inside the engine area there. That's going to get its own treatment. All right, that looks good. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to put it on here. And the reason for this is because this is actually all going to get painted black and or dark blue anyway. But this helps me to see where to stop painting, because it'll ride on that on the edges there, and so it'll provide a guide when I'm got my brush in there, trying to make sure I don't go where it's not supposed to be. All right, okay, well this all needs to dry, so I'm going to let it do that, and then I'll come back. So now it's all dry. I did go back with full strength Nuln Oil and very carefully dropped it into the panel lines because I didn't think they were quite defined enough. The other thing I did is, like I said, if you use too much of the wash, then you can get areas that you don't like. Well, and if that happens, you can take the Lamy and medium on its own and wash that over the area that you don't like, let it sit for 15-20 seconds, and then work it with a brush, and it will remove the old wash. So if you've watched my Millennium Falcon painting video, I actually use that technique as a weathering technique, and you could also use it here. For example, if you wanted to take one of these panels and make it look a little different, I can this is just Lamy and medium right there. I'm going to let that sit for a second. And I'm going to work it with my brush. And there. I don't know what the hell that is that keeps getting on there. But you can see how the Nuln Oil is coming off of there, and it makes that panel look bright, shiny, clean. Like, somebody left a clean spot. But that's not what I want to do right now. I think I'm going to work with a bit of the Agrax Earthshade. And just add some, ooh, that's too much. Just little dirty areas. Not quite rust, it breaks up the evenness of the gray tones, and makes it look a little bit more dirty, more weathered. Definitely put some over this stuff. Do it on the bottom. Always got to check and make sure I'm in frame. It's nice that I can easily do that now with the new camera, though. All right, and I'm going to go do this a bit around the rest of the model, and I'll be back. It looks like my my battery's wanting to die pretty soon anyway. Ooh, that's... You know what? I'm going to do another little cleanup here, I think. That's a little bit much. I'm going to throw some Lamy and medium on there. Look at that, because that's not fully dry yet. It just dispersed it. So cool. That works. All right, I'm going to work on this. I'll be back. All right. So, I think you can see a little bit of what I did with the Agrax Earthshade. There's a bit of, panel discoloration. And there too. And mostly I just went around and kind of just touched things and added a little bit more color to everything, just to break up the uniformity of the grays, as I mentioned before. And I think you've probably noticed that I did the black on the canopy, and I put some black on the guns, but I didn't really jump ahead too much. But what I was going to do right now is maybe add a couple of stars to the canopy. And you want a really good fine pointed brush for that. I got my Winsor Newton Series 7. This is my number 1. I'm going to mix a little bit of my medium with some appropriately named Celestra Gray. And that will be my primary star color, I think. And then I'm going to mix up, I think we're going to go for a little bit of blue. It's actually blue-violet. Joe Sonia blue-violet. And let me see. So a little bit of that. And just a touch of that. Lighten that up and thin it down. I think I want a little bit of the Celestra in there. A little bit more. Alright, we'll thin that down a little bit more. Really trying to make this a little transparent, and I will explain why in a second. I'm going to get this mixed up. So what I'm going to be doing here is reflections of the stars on the canopy. And for the most part, you can just do fine dots on the canopy. But it's kind of nice to add a glow to some of them. That's really big, but that's okay. I think I'm just going to do like 2. Yeah, we'll do a few more. So I'm making kind of big dots. I think you can see that. And then as those dry, you're going to very carefully see if I can find those dots again. Yeah, I think I need that to be a little less paint on there. All right. And put the dot in the middle of it, and that sort of gives it a halo effect. But then you want to add, you know, a few more other stars, and you want to try and make them as fine as possible. Stars are not, you know, the reflections of the stars are not going to be terribly bright in the canopy. That's another reason I'm not using white. Well, that is a reason I'm not using white. Another reason is because I generally like to avoid white as anything but a highlight color. Oop, that one's too much. There we go. Suppose if you were really ambitious, you could put the reflection of like the Death Star in there or something. I am nowhere near that ambitious or talented, so I'm not going to do it. But hey, you know what? If you do it, I want to see it. All right. The only thing left at this point is to do the engine glow. And that is going to require a bit of airbrushing. So I'm going to get set up for that, and I will be right back. You know what I decided? I decided this doesn't need an airbrush. And in fact, it's not necessarily going to be of any great benefit. It'd probably be just as difficult, if not more so, to do what I want to do. And that is, I want to get an engine glow in these engines. And to start with, I'm using Joe Sonia's Yellow Deep mixed with some of the Joe Sonia what do they call it? I think it's Flow Medium is what they call it. But it's really just, you know, it's just a medium. And I'm dropping this into the exhausts and then this ring. And then into these areas here. And I'm going to hit the outer edge. This would be an area where the airbrush might actually be helpful. But that's okay. I really felt like doing this by hand. Either way, it was going to be a pain because trying to shoot the airbrush, essentially thread the needle through these things. I did it last time, and I guess it wasn't too bad, but it was kind of annoying. I'm going to go ahead and get it all the way on these things. As if the exhaust is the exhaust glow is lighting those up. So a little bit of object source lighting, I guess. And then on to the edges here for the same reason. All right, so we've got all our yellow on there. And now I'm going to kind of experiment a bit with shades. I haven't tried this before. I'm tempted to use blood layer glaze, but I think that would actually be too bright. And so what I'm going to do is get a little bit of my Lamy and medium and mix that with a little bit of Fuegan orange, and that's got a nice deep color to it. And first I'm going to drop that into the middle here. And that's looking pretty good, so I'm going to go ahead and start adding it to other elements of this. And try not to get it on areas where you don't want it. kind of nice. It's a real sort of fiery yellow orange, which is exactly what I was looking for. What the hell is that? Oh, look, I've got it all over that area right there. But remember, you can always use your Lamy and medium to clean up those little trouble spots. Of course, probably going to clean up all of it, and I'll have to go back in and touch up the whole thing, but that's okay. Yeah, that's good enough for now. I'll come back to that. All right. Well, I'm going to do this close to my eye so I can see what I'm doing, but just to be clear, I'm not really going to be doing much more than what I'm doing now. I just want to get it really nice and even, and maybe add back in a little bit more of the bright yellow into some of the center points, to just add a little sort of visual interest and a little bit of a bright spot. But I'll do that, and I will come back in a moment. We're almost done. So as it turns out, I was done. And as you can see from the photos, it turned out quite nice. I'm really happy with the results, and my client appears to be very happy with the results as well. So that's going to end this for today. As usual, if you liked this video, please click like on this video. And if you want to make sure that you see more of my videos in the future, hit the subscribe button. That's going to do it for now, and hopefully in the very near future I'm going to have another X-Wing miniature repaint. So keep an eye out for that, and I will talk to you later.